Welcome to We Are the Hunt Sketchbook. Join me as I create and develop the world of the hunt, one drawing and one video at a time. When designing characters, I like to draw the occasional group shot of them all together. It lets me alternate between designing multiple characters at the same time, as well as seeing whether they fit together well as a group. These are the very early sketches of the first 4 girls, but today we'll be focusing on 2 of them. Today's video is a long one because we'll be covering 2 of these main characters and a lot of sketches. They are both very closely intertwined with each other and feature in a lot of sketches together, so this video will cover them both from start to our current day progress. And these 2 characters are the protagonist Gale and her best friend Helia. Let's talk about Gale first. While these names might still change over time, for now I'm settling on the name Gale Ahad. Her best friend is an Oni, and her name is Uzume Helia, her surname being first, so her given name is Helia. I don't have much figured out in the way of their backstories at the moment, but the main idea is that both Gale and Helia grew up together as orphans. War orphans are very common in We Are the Hunt's world, due to the constant war against the monsters in the setting. Multiple private orphanages exist that are sponsored by the government to feed and raise and train its orphans into functional members of society, especially as hunters. So having grown up together, Gale and Helia are childhood friends and are as close as siblings. They've always protected each other, looked out for one another, and basically have been inseparable, and finally deciding to enroll together as hunters in training. For Helia, there were a few main design goals I wanted to capture with her. Of course, she is partly inspired by certain characters, which if we're talking Ruby is Yang Xiaolong. As you know, back in Remnants, I redesigned Yang with a lot more of a tomboyish athletic appearance, which overall gave her a more cool, suave demeanor compared to a canon counterpart. I like to call this version of Yang a girl prince Yang. But with my Remnants Yang design, she ended up being more masculine or butch, which is still fine as an alternate universe version of Yang, but ended up a bit too divergent from the original spirit of the character. One of the core appeals of Yang I've observed that made her pretty popular among early Ruby fans is how she balanced both traditionally feminine and masculine traits, someone who's both tough and girly. So for Helia, I wanted to strike that tough but girly balance as well. The main vibe or visual tropes I pictured for her is Oni, Gyaru, delinquent. So I took a lot of reference from Gyaru fashion, Gyaru tropes. Yang from Ruby, despite not actually being a Gyaru, is actually very close to the Gyaru anime archetype. What if the blonde hair, being very extroverted, that kind of thing. So it's not a huge leap to also take from these tropes for Helia to evoke the same vibe. I was also taking reference from other characters I like 02 and Marin Kitagawa. Moving back to Gale, I was again trying to find the right balance for her hairstyle as usual. As time went on, I also started making her skin more and more tan. I find a slightly red skin tone made her colors stand out against her red color scheme a lot more. And just as a disclaimer, I will be alternating between these 2 characters quite a lot as I'm talking about them, just because I kind of want to reveal both the more final designs at the same time, so kind of building them up both at the same time. So eventually, I did start coming across some good reference material for how I wanted to design Gale's outfit. I knew I wanted to lean more into a punk sort of aesthetic and fashion. So here, I started looking into leather jackets, denim materials to kind of give her the vibe of a cute rocker chick. You'll see at the end of the video that I will start leaning into this punk aesthetic a lot more. Back to Helia. It was here that I started brainstorming her weapon and fighting style. Like Yang, I kind of wanted a pretty brawly and visceral combat style for her, but I didn't want to necessarily default to making her fight with solely her fists just yet. So eventually I had the idea, what if I made her fight with a baseball bat? There was a lot of cool references out there of fight scenes with baseball bats as weapons, And with Helia wielding a bat, not only did this lean nicely into her whole school delinquent vibe, but also to lightly evoke the idea of how Onis in mythology wield these giant kanabo clubs, which was very similar here, but with a modern twist. So that ended up working out nicely. This brings me to actually talk about the Oni part. What other fantasy races exist in We Are the Hunt besides humans? This was a question I was throwing around a lot while deciding what I wanted in this project. Should it be mostly humans, similar to Ruby where there's also animal people? Or closer to Zenless Zone Zero where there's a lot of animal people, but also other races like Oni, like elves and more? For now, in the interest of creativity, I decided to go for a wider selection of fantasy races. I see this direction as an opportunity to push my character design skills further, because a lot of fantasy race traits like animal ears and tails or Oni horns are a really good source of interesting character designs, and I wanted to see what I could do with these fantasy races, but flavor them into that very contemporary setting I imagine for We Are the Hunt, with modern fashion and modern technology like guns and computers. It was also here that I intentionally reminded myself to push the aesthetic of We Are the Hunt further, because I knew that I wanted We Are the Hunt to be very heavily focused on color, and how the characters themselves were the colors against the infinite darkness that besieged their world. So I had an idea for Helia. What if she went into an Oni berserker rage and her colors became even more crazy when she does so? I want to use color like a clear visual expression of the character's soul, or like the manifestation of magic or power in the setting. So the more wildly vibrant the colors are, the more raw, unbridled power it is that you're observing. At some point though, during this long process of just sketching, I was sort of just going along with the motions, just drawing, different iterations of hair or clothes. It wasn't really pushing just how far these designs could go. With We Are the Hunt, I really want this project to be as cool as I want it to be. I want these designs to look badass, something I would love to see fan art of or cosplays. The kind of designs I would see myself in like a game or an anime, and I would go, man, I wish I had thought up of that. So fortunately, I was browsing Twitter and I came across an artist called Shark Star Peach, who I'll link to in the description. I ended up really liking their art style and character designs. There's such an unabashed coolness about them that was very anime, but also really well designed and creative. And importantly here, I really dig their colors. Their colors were super vibrant and eye-catching, and looking at their art really gave me a big boost of inspiration to push We Are the Hunt's character designs just a little bit further. It was during this time when I was inspired by Sharkstar Peach's art that I went on a character sketching spree. Basically, I sketched out 4 of the main girls in one sitting, and I was super in the flow during this drawing session. But alas, it was also going to be 6 AM by the time I reached the last girl, and eventually I had to go to sleep. But this led me to drawing Gale again. I wanted to loosen up my line art. I think I was getting a bit too restricted by trying to get her exact hairstyle and character elements right. So this time, I just let my hand flow more freely and just draw what came most naturally. During this time, I was also playing around with the idea of making her a cute wolf girl, just to see how I could push her character design. I really liked the wolf girl look, especially her tail. I'm a big fan of the long, swishy, spiky tail, but I think as the protagonist, I leaned more towards making her the vanilla human, so that's what I'll be going with for now. But as a note though, moving forward, I don't intend to default to human for every character. Wherever possible, if I think I can make them a cool fantasy race to elevate their character design even more, I want to try and do so. There's a lot of reason for this too, which I hope to break down as more characters are designed. But basically, from now on, if I was making a character human instead of say an Oni or an animal person or whatever, it should be an intentional design choice. not just because I'm defaulting to the safest option, which is human. So back to Helia during this productive drawing session. I first started by drawing her in a regular school uniform, what you'd expect from a Gyaru type character. But then I started to experiment more, giving her the spiked collar and gloves, which I quite liked as it emphasized her tough girl vibe that I wanted, as well as these cool little embellishments on her uniform, like the shoulder crest or the brooch on her necktie. I wanted her uniformed look to be pretty straightforward, but it's the details like her choice of accessories and overall aesthetic that makes the design stand out and help inform you about her personality and how fashionable she is. So now we get into coloring her. I tried lots of different hair colors, but in the end, I keep coming back to blonde for that classic Gyaru vibe, so I guess that's what we're sticking with. I also played around with giving her these darker hair roots, and I'm committing to them here as it really helps sell the delinquent vibe I wanted, and I thought it was a really cool combo to combine the more fantastical Oni horns with this modern style of hair. And as for her Oni horns, there's honestly so many different creative types of horns I could give her. Horns that were, long or twisting or spiraling, very ornate designs and patterns. But for Helia specifically, I wanted some fairly simple horns, nothing too complicated or out there. I think she'd be the type to maintain and regularly trim her horns. One thing that was always constant though was that I wanted her Oni horns to be made of metal, and they would resemble little blades sticking out of her head. And with that, that's Uzume Helia done. And now finally, we go back to Gale. I leaned more and more into the kind of grungy punk aesthetic, so elements like the jacket, the ripped jeans and slightly weathered hoodie, the fishnet mesh undershirt, all that good stuff. It was definitely also a fine balance of making her have a lot of cool patterns and fashion elements, but not too much that it was overwhelming to draw. I could definitely go a lot harder into the punk look and give her, a lot of patches and metal studs and rips all over her clothing, but decided I just needed enough details to sell the look, but not too much. I like to imagine the characters I design more like something you would see in an animation or comic rather than, say, a gacha game character, so I always make it my philosophy to design my characters with an upper limit of detail in mind. I usually ask myself, or rather have it in the back of my mind while designing, if I'm an animator or comic artist and I'm drawing these characters hundreds of times, would I be fine with it? Or will I eventually lose steam and patience with all the details and eventually lose track of them? So it's also here that you can see me drawing a bit of a weapon. That one's fun, and I'll be dedicating a future video solely to just that, so I won't go into details for it just yet. But don't worry, it will likely be the next video or very soon after. I capped off this design with Gale's emblem on her hoodie. Emblems are its own whole thing too that I want to expand on in a future video, but basically the idea of every character somehow having their own badass custom emblem that represents themselves is something that I always found cool. It's a thing in Ruby, but also in some games like Alchemy Stars, and it's a tradition I intend to continue when we are the hunt. And with that, here's two of our main girls, Uzume Helia and Gale Outfit. I look forward to sharing more of them and developing them even further. We shall end this video here on the updated character screen with two of our main girls now named, and also several major steps closer to their final designs. Thank you for watching, and as always, see you next time.
The difference between your science and mine that I don't limit myself to correcting nature's imperfections. I improve